Alright, this was quite the process, and there are 53 slides, so I'm going to have to go through each one rather quickly to keep it short. Let's begin. This is a page from my notebook, and it basically just has the layout of the game as well as the piece count. This just gave me a really good idea for what I was going to need as far as materials. The lumber used or wood used is black walnut that was rough sawn in the 60s. My grandfather purchased it for a grandfather clock he was going to build in his farm in Illinois. This is leftover material that my dad has had in his shop here in Bemidji ever since. It had just enough material to finish the project. The first step was to plane down the pieces to 3/4 of an inch. And you can see here it's rough sawn again, and it has water spots on it. So I estimated probably, I would say, each piece took about 10 passes through the planer. This is probably pass 4 or 5, but you can see it's looking a lot more like furniture grade wood. This is after the pieces were planed down to 3/4 of an inch. Compound miter saw was then used to cross-cut the pieces to length. For sanding, I used a belt sander and followed that with a palm sander. You're going to see my dad in some of these pictures. He was home from a trip, and he was out in the shop working on some stuff. So he's in some of the shots, and some of the shots he's holding some of the equipment because, to be honest, I didn't trust him to take the pictures. So yeah, if you're wondering who it is my father. I wanted everything to be absolutely identical as far as the sides on the box is concerned. So what I did is after they were planed and cross-cut, I squared the edges and then I turned them up on end. I clamped them together, raised the planer, and then ran them all through as one. I used a table saw to run a dado in the bottom of the pieces that the masonite will slide into later. Rabbet was done with the table saw as well. We have a 3/4 inch piece of wood here, and I did a 1/2 inch rabbet with a 1/4 inch reveal. The plexi will sit into this groove. These are solder holes I use a scratch all for that are going to be for the slots in the sides of the box. See my dad here holding one side of the wood for the drill press. These are the starter holes for the slots. And then finally, I'm going to router them out now. You can see the wood makes a 90. The jig that I've made here allowed really for all the slots to be absolutely identical on not only this piece, but the piece across from it. Here you have a compound miter saw cutting a miter. I could have butted the wood up against each other on the corners, but I wanted a really seamless finish on the box, so I did a 45 miter for each of the corners. This is the front of the box, and I'm going to be cutting out now the drawer, or I guess the hole where the drawer will slide in and out of. I lowered the saw blade on the table saw all the way down, placed the wood over top, and then slowly raised the blade until it extended past the wood, and then moved it back and forth to the lines that you can see I've made with a pencil. To then cut the vertical sides of the hole and finish it off, I used just an oscillating handsaw. Masonite. This is the piece that I'm cutting now for the bottom of the box. And now for probably the most time-consuming part of this project, clamping. I can't even tell you the amount of clamps, but it really was the key to making sure this thing is absolutely set up from the time I clamped it to the time I removed the clamps to make sure that there was no play in any parts of the box whatsoever. So, miter clamps. Box is flipped upside down. Let me just say that. Miter clamps are on the bottom. Picture framing clamps on the other side. They're actually used for picture frames, but they allowed me to grab that groove at the bottom of that 3/4 inch on the bottom of the box. And Bessey clamps are running linearly, holding the box together. So this thing is adhered right now with Titebond 2 glue, and it is rock solid. This is just another shot. You get a better shot here of the picture framing clamps. Those are the darker clamps that you can see in the corners. This is when the clamps are removed. You can see by doing the miter corners, the corners are already looking pretty seamless, but you can see some slight glue that I will remove with a fine chisel, as well as folding them over. If there's any excess, if you ever need to fold a corner over slightly and there's any excess, you just take an edge of a hammer, a smooth hammer, and you just run it down the edge before you sand it. And it really just hides any imperfections, and then I guess where those two boards meet up. Caliper. This is a blessing and a curse to have. Everything on here is within thousandths of an inch. Most of it is to the thousandth of an inch because of the caliper. Again, sometimes it's a curse, because if you're messing with thousandths of an inch and you just are dead set on getting it to that point, it can take a long time. But this is a project. You have a lot of moving parts. You have the drawer going in and out with slots in it, slots in the sides, and the tiles or planks of wood need to be able to be moved down and rotated and come back up without any obstruction. So making sure everything was identical and very precise on this was key for pretty much every step. So here are just some more sketches in my notebook of rough layouts that I'm just going to cut for the sides of the drawer. This is probably, to some of you, a question why I would do a rabbet for the back of the drawer. Well, initially we were going to put stainless steel on the top of this. There's going to be 3 circles with a 1/4 inch gap between each circle. So what I have here is a 3/4 inch piece of wood, 1/2 inch rabbet, 1/4 inch reveal, or a 1/4 inch top on it. That 1/4 inch top would line up perfectly with the space between those circles. So it would pretty much hide the drawer back, which I wanted. Now, I went with Lexan, which is basically a stronger version of plexiglass you'll see later. And so you do see all this, but still, if I were to ever make this with stainless or an aluminum top, it would hide that drawer back very nicely. Here, my dad's showing how you can use a table saw to run a dado for the slots that are going to be in the drawer sides. And this is, again, to allow for those planks of wood to be moved down, line up perfectly with the sides, flipped 180, raised back up. Here I use a Forstner bit that is going to countersink the heads of the screws for the drawer pull. And here I'm setting up the glue and clamping for the drawer. Now, I didn't use miters on the drawer, miter clamps, because 1, it's not mitered, and 2, you can see that the face of the drawer, or the front of the drawer, actually extrudes slightly past on purpose on each side. Alright, so I could have dadoed the bottom of the drawer. However, this was a much better, more efficient way to do it, so I just used a router. Routed out the bottom of the drawer, and then followed that by cutting a piece of masonite. And by cutting a piece of masonite to the size and then 45ing the corners, you on the bottom can see that it's not fitting perfectly. Those corners do show a slight inset where they're not rounded, where the masonite is not rounded. Sorry, I don't know why I couldn't say that. But when you flip it over, you will never see that, and it saves a ton of time. Then that masonite is put into place with a pneumatic nailer and some Titebond 2 wood glue. This is a very sophisticated material called high density polyethylene, also known as a cutting board. It is an amazing drawer slide. You know, you guys are probably used to cabinet drawers where they have slides on each side, or even an old nightstand maybe that has a piece of wood underneath that has been waxed. But this is something that just absolutely, for years and years and years, will never give you any trouble as far as the drawer sliding smoothly in and out the entire way. So to make sure the drawer slides in and out without any play, I have placed the drawer in, clamped it so it is absolutely flush. You can see this board in the front is holding the drawer front absolutely flush, and I have clamped down the sides of the drawer in place. That means when this glue is set up and I remove those clamps, that drawer is in the exact spot it needs to be when it's going to be moved in and out. And again, you know, I'm sure you guys have all opened a drawer on a cabinet, and it can get cockeyed very easily and hard to put back in. And with this, that will not happen. I have the cutting board here laying down. There's a piece of paper in the back, and the reason that piece of paper is there is because it is folded up, and it's going to be glued in the very back underneath the cutting board to allow for the perfect pitch for the drawer to slide in and out. The drawer back here, or I should say not the drawer back, the drawer stop. So again, you can see the front of the drawer held flush. The drawer guides are in place, and now the drawer stop is being put in. And so by holding all those in place and then putting the stop in, I know at the very point that drawer stops, it is perfectly flush again with the front of the box. These are just some temporary pieces I cut to mock up the game pieces that allow me to kind of get an idea of the room I had to play with inside the drawer. The handles I rendered out in the beginning, the initial render, start of the project. I did not know if they existed, but I liked. I built them in the 3D software, and excuse me, sorry. I was hoping I could find them, and I did. I found them, but they were threaded to the wrong size. So what I did is I took a drill bit, a 15th 64th, I believe. And drilled those out, and then I tapped them with a 1/4 inch. And this is a picture of me tapping them. The rest of the handle is inside this jig right now. Doweling jig. Doweling jig was used on the planks, and what this does is it ensures that when I do the holes that are going to be inside the planks for the rods to slide into, they are absolutely centered, and also the bit goes in absolutely parallel with the wood, or linearly. It is a great jig to use when you have to be extremely precise. I just used regular bolts, 8-inch bolts for the rods. And what I did is I cut off the threads that I didn't need, and then I cut off the head that I didn't need. And the section where the head is now a smooth rod. I slid that into the turnable wood planks, and then the other end will go through the slot with a few threads on it that will screw into the handles that are now tapped to a 1/4 inch as well. My dad demonstrates here how you can use a nut on a screw to actually sand it flush. If you're trying to, you know, we use a saw to cut it, and now basically you have a cut that is not that perfect. So just sanding it up to the nut allows for a very flush finish on, I guess, your new length bolt. So this is when the product started to, I guess, look like the initial render somewhat. Still a lot to do on it, but this is just a picture showing once. And actually nothing, the planks are not glued to the handles at this point. This is all just set in here. The only thing that are glued is the drawer and the box itself. Lexan. So instead of Plexi, I got Lexan. Lexan is a lot stronger. You can see here it has a graphic film on it. That's why it kind of looks weird. But what I'm doing here is I'm going to attempt to shave it down to the perfect size. It's pretty close right now to the right size because I ran it through with a fine-tooth saw on the table saw, but I wanted it a little smaller, so I tried to use a palm sander, and it was going to take years. So I grabbed my phone, figured out that the belt sander would do the trick without turning it up too much, and here you can see just shaving off a little bit with the belt sander. Again, wood jig clamps set in place to make sure it's absolutely flush all the way to, you know, front to back. And that is it, not glued in, just sitting in the top there again, still has the graphics on it. So this dowel really had no part in the project except for a temporary holder as a game piece, but I wanted to show this because if you're ever going to cut a dowel and you're going to experience, no matter how careful you are with the saw, or if you let the saw quit with the blade down and then slowly raise it up when it stopped, you're going to have a splintered dowel on the edge. It's near impossible not to. We have a lot of frog tape around here, which is that green tape. You just wrap the dowel up, make your cut, remove the tape, and the splinters, it pretty much removes 99% of the splintering of the wood. This is actually a little sketch I did just to get some dimensions for Nick. He was making the cover for, it's going to go around the board. So this is basically just showing the drawer handle in relation to the rest of the box. Mineral oil. Honestly, $1.50 for a quart of mineral oil, and it goes a long, long way. The reason I use mineral oil instead of stain is stain drips, and when stain drips you can get drip marks. Mineral oil does not do that. Mineral oil soaks into the wood very well. You get the natural wood color, it pulls the grain out, and it's just like a very, very, very I don't want to say, but pretty. It's a very pretty way for I guess wood to be finished off with. There's no odor, and it's you let it sit. You can wipe off the excess with a towel, and it's just a great thing to use on wood projects. I use it all the time. These are small stands that are just lifting the box up while the mineral oil dries. Oh, I shouldn't even say dries, while it soaks into the wood. Hope did an amazing job on these flippable tiles or planks of wood. She designed them and then put them into Ardios and laser etched the planks. And you can see here I've glued the rods in place now, the handles, and there's actually quite a system used to make sure those handles and those planks were absolutely, I guess, parallel with each other. Little levels were set on each one of the planks, while larger levels were set across the handles. And it turned out, we were going to basically use epoxy for the holes, and instead we went with a different solution, and it helped perfectly. Here you see 40 to 60 pounds of weight down on the drawer. Now it's not putting any pressure really on the drawer because that masonite is flush on the bottom, but the drawer is lined with cork, and when you adhere cork, unless you're going to sit there and hold it down, it's probably not going to adhere absolutely perfectly or flush. So what we did, cut a piece of wood, put a screw in it so we'll be able to lift it out when it's done, and set it down into the drawer. It's the exact size of the inside of the drawer. And then some weights are added on top, and just let those sit for that glue to adhere. Drawer dividers probably look like a very small portion of this project, but they took a long, long time. When I was talking about the micrometer being overly precise, I was out in the shop messing with 5/1000ths of an inch trying to hit a mark, and got rather close. But again, is anybody going to notice thousandths of an inch? No. But it's that kind of I guess precision when doing a project like this. It really allows for everything else to go smoothly. Sorry. So here the dividers are glued and getting set up. The dividers are then held in place to the drawer with some screws on the bottom. You can see here I just used a tape measure, measured out lines of where the dividers would sit, drilled some pilot holes with a drill bit, and then countersunk the screws in. Didn't even need to use a bit. Masonite's soft, so it was just, I guess, yeah, that's all there is to say about that. The board could have easily just sat on the bottom of the wood, but had these, actually didn't have to buy these rubber feet I had from a project prior, and they were going to be a hair short, so you can see I used a hole saw to cut circular discs that the feet sit inside of, and the box looks probably like it sits just on the bottom, but actually it's probably 1/64 of an inch off of the table or whatever it is sitting off of. And this is a shot of the box when it's all finished. My group and I met at this school and to take some pictures, and this picture is from that meeting. And that concludes the process for making the game board.